Hey guys, Dalek44 here. I need no introduction, but I got one anyway. Well, the Chris Chibnall era of Doctor Who is coming to an end very, very soon, and we'll be entering the new era run by original showrunner for 2005, Russell T Davies. Ever since Doctor Who returned to our TV screens in 2005, the show has been through 3 showrunners as of late. From 2005 to 2010 we've had Russell T Davies, and most Doctor Who fans would agree that his era was the number 1 for the new series. And from 2010 to 2018 we've had Steven Moffat, whose series has been hit and miss with a lot of fans. Then from 2018 to this year we've had Chris Chibnall, who most people hate. Well, hate's a bit of a strong word, his run has been hit and miss as well. But more people see it as a miss rather than a hit. But there's one thing that we can all agree on. Chris Chibnall has been very serious about bringing back some of the old favourites. You name it, Daleks, Cybermen, Sontarans, Sea Devils, Captain Jack Harkness. He had a great emphasis on bringing those back in his era. Series 11 was a huge departure from the previous seasons because it had no classic monsters show up until the New Year's Day special Resolution, when they brought back the Daleks. And since then, Chris Chibnall has been bringing back lots of the old favourites in the show. The Master, Captain Jack Harkness, the Jadoon, the Cybermen, the Daleks again, the Sontarans, the Weeping Angels, Kate Ledbridge-Stewart of UNIT, the Daleks again, the Sea Devils. He'd also given us cameos from old favourites including the Ood and the Sycorax and the Silence in Revolution of the Daleks, as well as giving an Ood a supporting role in the Flux series. And for the upcoming Centenary special, he's bringing back the Daleks, the Cybermen, Ashard the Lone Cyberman, the Master, Tegan, Ace, and Kate Ledbridge-Stewart. So however you look at Chris Chibnall's head writing style, he's had a great emphasis on bringing back some of the classic monsters and the old favourites from past seasons. And with Russell T Davies here at point 2, we can expect to see some phenomenal Dalek stories like he did back in the old days. When Chibnall first brought back the Daleks in Resolution, he proved that he could handle the Daleks better than Steven Moffat did. Because let's be honest, Moffat's era made it seem like the Daleks were just there just because they felt obliged to be there, whereas Chibnall actually wrote them as good villains again since the Russell T Davies era. Then when he wrote Revolution of the Daleks, he brought back that old feel that the classic series episode Remembrance of the Daleks had, with 2 Dalek factions fighting each other, while introducing us to new ranks of Daleks including the Reconnaissance Scouts and the Death Squads. Then the recent New Year special, Eve of the Daleks, saw the Daleks with a new rank known as the Executioners. So it's needless to say that Chris Chibnall understands the Daleks almost as much as Russell T Davies did. And like Moffat, Chibnall has kept on the Time War Dalek designs that were introduced in 2005. While at the same time creating 2 new one-off Dalek designs, with the Reconnaissance Scout Dalek and the Defense Drone Daleks. So to celebrate the upcoming new era of Russell T Davies for Doctor Who, I'm going to take a look at the history of the Time War Daleks. Many fans would say that the Time War actually started in the 1975 episode, Genesis of the Daleks, when the Time Lords sent the Doctor back in time to the Daleks' creation to prevent it, because they foresaw a time when they would become the dominant species in the universe. So to new Who fans, this could hint that they probably saw their victory in the Time War and wanted to prevent it. So you could say that that was when the first fire was shot from the Time Lords. And then the final straw for the Daleks was in Remembrance of the Daleks, when the Doctor tricked Davros into using the Hand of Omega to destroy Skaro. And so began the last great Time War, the war to end all wars between the Time Lords and the Daleks. The war had severe consequences on the universe. While it was invisible to smaller species, it was devastating to higher forms of life. But we'll get to those in a bit. In fact, the war was so famous, or infamous depending on how you see it, that the Sontaran Empire even wanted to join the fight, being rejected by both Daleks and Time Lords.
The last great Time War. The finest war in history, and we weren't allowed to be part of it.
Was that? I think it's the sound of no one caring!
The 8th Doctor fought in the Time War, and then the War Doctor fought in it. And during the final days, Rassilon, president of the Time Lords, had planned to initiate the final sanction and bring about the end of time, destroying all of reality, while the Doctor planned to use the moment to destroy Daleks and Time Lords. But thanks to 13 incarnations of the Doctor, they were able to save Gallifrey from extinction and destroy the Daleks in the Crossfire. While the Time War was over, it had many severe consequences for various life forms. The Zygons lost their home world in the first days of the Time War, and since then have been looking to find a new home, mainly Earth. Then Esteem Consciousness' home was destroyed in the Time War, and it set out to conquer Earth like it did before with the Third Doctor. The Gelf's home planet was destroyed in the war, reducing them to gas creatures that attempted to take over Victorian London and possess dead bodies. And it's been hinted that Eve from the Sarah Jane Adventures and the rest of her species were probably affected by the Time War. She said there were many exterminations. But for all we know, that could either be the Time War or just a regular Dalek invasion. Who the hell knows? But the final days of the Time War wasn't enough to end the Dalek Empire completely, as the Doctor found out in the 2005 episode Dalek. Before the end of the war, one Dalek fell through time and landed on the Ascension Islands around 1962. Insane and screaming, it passed through several private collections in the 20th and 21st centuries. By 2012, it was in the possession of billionaire Henry Van Staten, who kept it in a cage. With the intention of reaching other Daleks, they sent out a distress signal which was detected by the Ninth Doctor and Rose Tyler. Initially unaware of the source of the distress signal, the Doctor came to investigate. The Doctor and the Metaltron, as Van Staten called it, had a hostile discussion about the end of the war, and the Doctor tried to kill it before being stopped by Van Staten. When Rose met the creature, it seemed to be a harmless victim, and, in an attempt to comfort it, she touched its dome. It absorbed her Artron energy and DNA and regenerated itself, escaping from the cage, making its way upwards through the vault to the surface, killing Van Staten's personnel as it went. And I think we can all agree that that first kill it made with its sucker on was so badass and terrifying, and it still is to this day. It made its way through the floors of the museum, using its new levitation skills to get upstairs, killing many of the employees with its ray gun, and using water and electricity from its gun to kill many people in a snap. By the time it reached the surface, it had begun to mutate and started to feel emotions due to absorbing Rose's DNA. Being unable to kill Rose, or Van Staten having been convinced that it could just have freedom. Considering the all-new emotions to be a sickness, the Dalek asked Rose to order it to self-destruct, preferring death to a life with emotions. She refused at first, but eventually gave the order, and it destroyed itself, presumably ending the Time War for good that time. Despite this last Dalek killing itself because it didn't want to be part human, that wasn't the end of the Daleks completely, as the Doctor once again found out in the 2005 two-parter story, Bad Wolf and the Parting of the Ways. A lone ship containing the Emperor Dalek of the war also barely survived the Time War, falling through time in a heavily damaged state. It went into seclusion at the edge of the solar system, damaged but rebuilding. During the Fourth Great and Bountiful Human Empire in the year 199,909, it secretly installed the mighty Jaguarfest of the Holy Hadrajasit Matsuromo aboard Satellite 5 to play the long game of slowly manipulating humans and re-establishing the Dalek species and fleet. The Jaguarfest employed the editor played by Simon Pegg to overlook things for him. But 100 years after the Jaguarfest and the editors were killed, in the year 200,100, the Emperor was still using Satellite 5, now renamed the Game Station, to manipulate humanity and conceal his fleet. The Emperor secretly used transmat technology aboard the space station to kidnap humans for nearly 200 years, forcing them to play in several game shows, including Weakest Link, The Big Brother, and What Not to Wear, with losers being transported to the Dalek ships to use as experiments for rebuilding the Dalek army. Kidnapped humans were harvested for their genetic material, and 1 cell in a billion was used to rebuild the new Dalek race, numbering roughly 500,000 aboard a fleet of 200 ships. When the Ninth Doctor, Rose, and Captain Jack Harkness were transmatted into the games, they quickly escaped and discovered from the controller that the Daleks were the Masters. Once detected, the Daleks began their invasion plans and quickly killed all the humans that had either not evacuated yet or chosen to fight. And one of the most scary and badass scenes for the Daleks from this episode is when they go to Floor Zero to kill all the humans that chose not to join the fight, because there was no need for the Daleks to kill those humans since they were unarmed and defenseless, but they did it anyway just because they were not Dalek. That's just so awesomely Dalek in my opinion. Captain Jack was one of the humans killed in the process, with the Doctor sending Rose back to 2005 to protect her. To make the Earth into their paradise, the Daleks also heavily bombed the Earth with continents such as Australasia, being described as gone in the aftermath. Just as the Daleks were about to exterminate the Doctor, the TARDIS materialised, and Rose, who had absorbed the energy of the Time Vortex, had become an entity known as Bad Wolf, stepped out. She scattered the words Bad Wolf across time and space to inspire Rose to become the entity in the first place. She then divided the atoms of the entire Dalek fleet, turning them all, including the Emperor who had claimed to be immortal, to dust. And then, in what would be called by the 10th Doctor the final act of the Time War, she resurrected Jack from the dead, accidentally giving him immortality. To save her life, the Doctor absorbed the Time Vortex from Rose, which had caused him to regenerate into his next incarnation, with the 9th Doctor being confident that the human race would rebuild itself, thus ending the Time War once and for all, once again. So with the Dalek Emperor and his entire fleet destroyed at the hands of Rose Tyler and the Time Vortex, it seemed like the Dalek Emperor was wiped out for good. But that was not to be, as the Doctor and Rose found out in the 2006 two-parter, Army of Ghosts and Doomsday. During the last Great Time War, there was a secret order of Daleks known as the Cult of Skaro, with the members Dalek Faye, Dalek Jast and Dalek Khan, and their leader Dalek Sek, being tasked by the Emperor to imagine new ways of survival, thinking as the enemy thinks and even daring to have names. During the war, they stole Time Lord technology known as the Genesis Ark, and built themselves a void ship and escaped from the Time War to survive and restore the Dalek supremacy if they ever faced near extinction. In present-day Earth, the Torchwood Institute's meddling began to open the barrier into the void which had been broken down by the cult's void ship. Torchwood Tower, known to the public as Canary Wharf, led by Yvonne Hartman, had been built around the gap into the void so that Torchwood 1 could study it and use its energy. But doing this caused the Cybermen from Pete's world to break through the barriers from their world and travel through to ours, bringing 5 million Cybermen into our world. And the Cult of Skaro at last emerged with the Genesis Ark from the Void Ship. Now this cliffhanger for Army of Ghosts was one hell of a great cliffhanger, and it had many Doctor Who fans shitting themselves as soon as they saw it for the first time. And I'd say it's up there with the cliffhanger for Part 1 of Earthshock. Spoilers guys, the Cybermen showed up in that one. They soon discovered that the Cybermen had already invaded Earth, and ended up starting an all-out war with them, leading to the Battle of Canary Wharf, while humanity was caught in the middle of the conflict. But not before giving some great pre-battle banter.
Daleks people, you have declared war upon the Cybermen. It is not war, it is pest control. We have 5 million Cybermen. How many are you? Or you would destroy the Cybermen with 4 Daleks. We would destroy the Cybermen with 1 Dalek. You are superior in only one respect. What is that? You are better at dying.
They are such bitches. He then opened the Genesis Ark with the help of Mickey the Idiot's handprint, since he travelled through time in TARDIS as well, and released millions of Daleks onto England. It turned out then that the Genesis Ark was actually a Time Lord prison ship, which had millions of Daleks imprisoned in it from the Time War. And as soon as they escaped the void, Dalek ordered a new army to exterminate all life forms below them, humans and Cybermen. All these Daleks were sucked into the void along with the Cybermen by the 10th Doctor's interference. However, the Cult of Skaro escaped before being returned to the void using an emergency temporal shift. With the Battle of Canary Wharf ended with many casualties, it seemed like the Daleks were gone for good for the Doctor. But we all knew the truth. This time around we knew that the Daleks weren't finished for good, since Dalek and the Cult of Skaro had escaped using emergency temporal shift. But we wouldn't see them again until the 2007 story, Daleks in Manhattan and Evolution of the Daleks. After using emergency temporal shift, the cult ended up in New York in 1930. They infiltrated the construction of the Empire State Building and began what they called the final experiment, the creation of a new Dalek race. Inside the sewers below the Empire State Building, they set up a genetic laboratory and attempted to create new Dalek embryos. After the failure of this experiment, they tried thinking creatively, as the cult were designed to do. They devised a plan using humans' greatest resource, its people. They placed Dalekanium onto the mass of the Empire State Building, intended to fuse the DNA of Daleks and humans using an oncoming ray of gamma radiation from the sun. Dalek sect tested this on Mr. Diagoras, becoming a Dalek-human hybrid, now with human thoughts and emotions. As the invasion of Manhattan began, Dalek sect began to want the Dalek humans to keep their human emotions. Having Dalek sect discover that sticking to their purity was what caused their near extinction in the first place was very controversial at the time. But it's a very interesting concept looking back at it years later. But the other Daleks, although bred to obey Sec, believed that this was against the Dalek cause. They secretly changed the DNA to 100% Dalek and imprisoned Dalek Sec. Dalek Sec was of course pissed off with this betrayal, but the cult of Skaro answered back with this kick-ass line.
You told us to imagine, and we imagined your irrelevance.
I miss the cult's snarky attitude. Dalek Sec was later exterminated accidentally after the other cult members attempted to kill the Doctor. As the Doctor got in the way of the blast of the gamma radiation, it infused the DNA of some of his own. The human Daleks rebelled and killed Daleks Faye and Jast, before being killed themselves by Dalek Khan. The Doctor offered to help Khan, the last surviving Dalek, but instead of taking it, Khan used an emergency temporal shift to escape once more. So most of the cult of Skaro were destroyed and the Daleks were wiped out once again, with Dalek Khan being the only one remaining. And he wouldn't pop up again until the 2008 two-parter finale, The Stolen Earth and The Journey's End. We have to backtrack again to the Time War. In the first years of it, to be exact, at the gates of Elysium, Davros, along with his command ship, was doomed to destruction in the war when it flew into the jaws of the Nightmare Child. But just before his demise, Dalek Khan was able to enter the Time War despite it being time-locked and save Davros from his death, at the cost of his own sanity. But Davros saw this as a great achievement, having won Dalek succeed where Time Lords have failed. This gave Davros time to rebuild a new Dalek army and prepare the new invasions of Earth, in the stories The Stolen Earth and Journey's End. He created a new race of Daleks by giving himself to them, literally, with each Dalek grown from one of his body cells. Eventually they stole 27 planets, including Earth, in an attempt to power their new machine, the Reality Bomb, from their Crucible command ship. This invasion was so bad that it brought a majority of the Doctor's companions together. Rose Tyler, Mickey Smith, Martha Jones, Donna Noble, Sarah Jane Smith and Captain Jack Harkness were able to summon the Doctor to the Medusa Cascade where all the planets were being kept. As the Doctor and each of his companions were captured by the Daleks, it was revealed that the Reality Bomb was being used to destroy all of humanity and reality, making the Daleks the only life forms in existence. They tested their new weapon on the prisoners that they had captured from Earth, and when the test was successful they planned to use full transmission to dissolve the entire universe, ours and every parallel world alike, leaving only the Daleks. When the Doctor and his former companions banded together to stop Davros and the Daleks from using their Reality Bomb, all of their efforts failed until Davros electrocuted Donna Noble, who had previously touched the Doctor's spare hand which he had put his regeneration energy into shortly after a Dalek had exterminated him in the streets. And by touching the hand, Donna created a Metacrisis Doctor who was half Time Lord, half human, and that electrocution from Davros woke up a bit of Time Lord consciousness within Donna, allowing her to take control of the Crucible and bringing the Daleks down to their knees. If they had knees, that is. It was revealed then that Dalek Khan had actually seen what the Daleks had done throughout time and space, and had planned to bring about the end of the species, which resulted in the Metacrisis Doctor destroying the entire Dalek fleet along with the Crucible. The 10th Doctor, appalled by this action, offered to help Davros escape from his demise, but Davros declined, blaming the Doctor for what had happened and naming him the Destroyer of Worlds before disappearing in a fiery flame. So with Davros, Dalek Khan, and the entire Dalek fleet as well as the Crucible destroyed, that seemed like the end of the Dalek race once and for all. But that didn't last very long, as we found out in the 2010 episode Victory of the Daleks. In the Series 5 episode Victory of the Daleks, it was revealed that 3 of the Daleks survived on one ship which fell back through time to 1940s Earth, where they ended up finding a Dalek progenitor device during World War II, hatching a plan to get the Doctor to use his testimony to open it since the progenitor saw their DNA as impure and create a new breed of Daleks. I didn't talk about Victory of the Daleks in as much detail as I did the previous episodes, because I think Stolen Earth and Journey's End was a better ending for the Time War Daleks storyline. since they went out like badasses, whereas the ones in Victory of the Daleks just accepted their fate, went out like assholes. But it's still a fun story to look back on years later. And these new Dalek designs had the potential to show what they could really do, as Stephen Moffat originally intended before he gave in to the fans complaining about their design and how they looked too plasticky. Of course, he did try to fix it by making them look more metallic in the Asylum of the Daleks, but after that episode he eventually gave up on them, giving in to the fans' angry letters and whatnot. And the Time War Daleks' bronze designs stick around for a long time in the show, going through the Stephen Moffat era right into the Chris Chibnall era. And we have no idea if Russell T Davies is going to stick with this casing or if he's going to create a new Dalek design in the future. But we'll have to wait and see. But it's pretty needless to say that the Dalek design from 2005 has become really popular and iconic over the years. While over the years we have been getting the same breed of Time War Daleks with that bronze design over the years, Russell T Davies and even Chris Chibnall had given us a few newer ones then, with some different colour schemes and different weaponries. The first new weaponry Dalek we had was the ones from the Parting of the Ways, where they had that drill that could cut through doors. The Parting of the Ways even gave us those Imperial Guard Daleks we saw next to the Emperor Dalek, with the black domes and the different weaponries. The second one was with Dalek Sec with that jet black casing, which I think should come back as different Daleks rather than just Dalek Sec brought back from the dead. I think that jet black Dalek casing would make great for a Dalek leader in the fleets, either as another Supreme Dalek or perhaps a Dalek Commander who commands the fleet. The Stolen Earth and Journey's End gave us two new Dalek variants for the Time War Daleks. That busy Supreme Dalek with the red and gold paintings and the additions to make it look taller, as well as 3 lights on its dome. And those cool Crucible Daleks with those weapons where we have no idea what the hell they do. And they never even revealed what they did, but they look cool all the same. Even Stephen Moffat gave us a different variant in Victory of the Daleks with the Ironside Daleks, set up to look like they came from World War II. To me they look really awesome, and it feels like they could have come from the genesis of the Dalek story if it was made back in 2010, with those packs around their casings containing whatever the hell they're supposed to contain, and that Union Jack on their dome instead of the Dalek symbols that they usually have. That looks really awesome in my opinion. And while Chris Chibnall brought back the bronze Dalek designs for Revolution of the Daleks and Eve of the Daleks, he changed them up a little bit by giving them some new weapons. In Revolution they had these claw-like weapons that never really did anything, to be honest, and seemed like they were just there just because the defense drones had it. Then in Eve of the Daleks they gave the Execution Squad Daleks an awesome new ray gun that shot multiple rays of death, sort of like a machine gun, which I think is really awesome by the way. But either way you look at it, it's still the same original bronze design when they could have at least given them a new colour scheme or given each of them different coloured domes or something. Like what they did with the CGI Imperial Guard Daleks from the Parting of the Ways. Just give us a little bit of variety. And with Russell T Davies returning as head writer, we have no idea if he's going to create a new Dalek design or stick with the Time War Dalek designs that he created. And if he does create a new design, then I really am going to miss the Time War Dalek designs because that's the design I grew up with. But if he doesn't make a new design and sticks with this one, I expect to see some variety in their casings, like different colour schemes, different weapons, new ranks and so on and so forth. But whatever he decides to do, it's needless to say that he's going to create some badass Dalek stories again, just like he did in the old days. The Daleks have gone through many design changes over the years since 1965, with their silver and blues, their greys, their whites and golds and so on and so forth. But the Time War Dalek designs is one of the most iconic designs in the series, as since it's the one that stuck around the longest. And some people are either really sick of this design or they really love this design and want to see it go on for many years to come. And I'm one of those that's sort of somewhere in the middle. On one hand I love the design because it's the one I grew up with, but on the other hand I'd like to either see a new design be introduced in sometime in the near future or at least give us some varieties of the Time War design. But whatever happens, we all know that Russell T Davies is going to give us some badass and awesome Dalek stories once again. And until then we got their reappearance to look forward to in the special in October. And whatever happens in the future of the Russell T Davies 0.2, we all know we're going to get some awesome Dalek stories once again. And I look forward to seeing what they're going to be up to in the future of the series. I'm Dalek44, and I'll see you next time folks.